Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of the Red Chip Poker Podcast. I'm your host, James Splitsuit Sweeney, joined as always by Chris Warren. And this is a different one because we are, for the first time, I think, since recording in the exact same place. So let us know what you think of this format, what you think of the audio and the video part of this. But essentially, today we want to continue the conversation of lag play. So, Chris, where do you want to start this conversation?
Yeah, so I thought it would be really good just to basically get us what are the specific plays that people are making? What are the specific ranges people are making? Because we kind of gave the reasons why we play lag. We talked about, I think a bit of these plays, but let's get really specific about, I think, where are the greatest volume of plays coming from when you play lag? Because I think a lot of people get lost and then they end up just over bluffing, barreling off in situations that don't make sense. And so we have a nice list of plays that you should definitely be making a higher volume of, and the ones that you need to be a lot more careful with that people tend to go crazy with.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the issue, right? Is once you start throwing lag in there, it's way easy to get super off the rails with it. And all of a sudden you're just going crazy. Your VPIP's through the roof, your PFR's through the roof, your 3-bets through the roof. And it's like, now you're just an aggro fish. And now it's super easy to beat you as well. So which play do you want to start with? Let's start there.
I mean, and I know we addressed this last week, but definitely the number one play is going to be 3-betting light, right?
Sure.
And this is because, there's so many reasons about this. And if you've been a listener of the podcast, people are going to know. But basically, 3-betting light, when you're in position, and this is what we're talking about, we're not talking about our 3-betting out of position. See our 3-betting out of position episode for that.
Yep.
But 3-betting light in position, it's just such a powerful play. And especially in small stakes game, especially in live games, you're so rarely going to be facing that 4-bet light back at you,
Correct.
which is the main defense against it. It basically lets you 3-bet kind of with impunity. And it's such a powerful play. If you get a good handle on this play, you're able to take advantage of players who are not as strong at defending it, not as strong just with their overall balance and opening ranges. It gives you a incredibly powerful tool to punish people. Almost every talented player is using this play pretty aggressively, I would
Correct.
say.
It's really one of the first things you look for, right? You might look for stealing maybe as the first and foremost way to get into lag, but after that, it's 3-betting. And then we just start ramping it up from there. But 3-betting first and foremost. So essentially the big thing I'm looking for is the big gap between essentially the number of hands they're going to open with and then the number of hands they're continue with. And if they're only going to continue with a very small number of their original hands, they're folding a tremendous amount and you can just kind of start going nuts. Now, again, you still have to look at other factors, right? Who's behind you? Are there a bunch of players in the blinds that are likely to continue? Any passive fish behind you? All those kind of things. So those could be things that kind of keep you from going crazy. But this is the first thing you should be looking for. And once you start noticing that their fold versus 3-bet starts creeping up into the 75% range, 80% range, that's when you really start adding a tremendous amount to the range. So if before you were, maybe 6s plus and some double Broadway stuff and maybe some ace-x suited, now you start looking for adding the cuspy hands. So you add maybe more double Broadways or maybe the full thing of ace-x suited, maybe a little bit of the king-x suited, like king-9, king-8 suited. So again, it's kind of incremental. Every hand you're going to add in should pretty much be a cusp off of something else. The only real time that I change on that is if I'm going to kind of fork into the ace wheel offsuit. Right, so maybe it was like ace deuce to ace 5 suited before, and now instead of going to king 8, king 7 suited, I'll say take ace 5 offsuit instead. Not always, but again, it's just we're talking about the nitty gritty part of this preference points. But other than that, if they're going to continue folding, then you just continue adding more and more, and you throw in more and more cusp hands, and just be smart about it. And again, ratchet it up to the same extreme that they're going to overfold.
Yeah, and I would extend that, if we're really talking about pushing our lag strategy, if we're dealing with someone who is folding enough, even to a point where it's like maybe not 70%, but something like 50%, and then they're not 4-betting you, to me, I'm making enough money on average for the times I get away with it that post-flop, I'm going to be able to play a really wide range. So I would say my default, and this is generally with a skill advantage and post-flop and all that, my default is probably going to be something like maybe any 2 suited cards if I'm feeling like the blinds are, calm and will let me do my thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I might go any 2 suited cards. I might go, any offsuit Broadway. That could be a very reasonable range to attack with 3-bets. when you're in a good spot. Now that's like, everything's kind of lined up. There's tight people behind you. It's good to account about 2 to 4% loss per player behind you.
Right.
Just picking up queens plus ace king type of stuff, even maybe more like jacks plus. Yeah, you just have to figure it out.
Still 2
Do a
3%
little,
per. Yeah.
yeah, very easy. Pop it into Equilab, the range that you have, and then that's how much you'll essentially be up against. But the thing is too, oftentimes when someone picks up tens or even kings or whatever in those spots, they'll just flat call you out of the blinds, not wanting to like demonstrate their hand. So you even have equity realization against those very strong ranges that people don't account for. And that equity realization when in position is usually worth like 4 cards. And this is really kind of the power of the light 3-bet. So, and I'll be honest, when the situation really lines up, I will go any 2 cards. It's not a play that happens all the time, and you can't generally just keep doing that.
Correct.
But it comes up enough that when you're playing lag, like, and I think this is even better than stealing because it's just a direct value steal from someone else's frequency.
Yep.
Whereas in open, it's like people kind of know what hands to play pre-flop. It's hard to really make that much money. You are maybe making some volume, but.
And let's really hammer in on that point because I think it's extremely important. Is there is a big difference between when someone continues against this 3-bet, them calling versus them 4-betting.
Yes.
And again, like we mentioned, like most people at smaller, even a lot of medium games don't really 4-bet enough. They might understand, okay, they're 3-betting in a lot, so I'm going to call with more hands.
Yeah.
So they understand not folding as much, but they're still not 4-betting very often. And the important part of that is the equity realization, like you mentioned, being able to get to the flop and make decisions. And also, a lot of the hands they're going to continue with, let's just say it's ace jack off or whatever kind of hand like that, what are they going to do? They're going to miss the flop a lot, and you can pretty much punish with smaller size C-bets.
Yep.
So you can see how some of the advice we've talked about over the season of smaller size C-bets and thinking about the aggression can really start kind of all melding together here. And it's not just, oh, well, they're going to continue, so I can't get aggressive. It's like, okay, how are they going to continue? Which mistakes are they making, both pre-flop and post-flop? And then start deciding, could I ratchet it up even higher? Yeah, if you find someone who's folding more than 70% against a 3-bet, I mean, it's print money time. Like, it's very, very easy. But even if they're continuing 50% and they're calling a lot, still pretty darn easy because they're going to have a lot of hellish times post-flop. And this is why you could start by 3-betting the button more, right? Because that way, if they do continue, you're in position. They're probably still going to make just as many out-of-position mistakes. And then you can start ratcheting from there. We talked a couple episodes back about the re-steals, essentially. And now we're really talking about finding other kind of 3-bets as well. Because I think that episode really hammered that topic really well. So yeah, any other things to kind of mention on the light 3-betting side of things?
No, it's just remember, this is the number one strategy you have as a lag, I think, is the light 3-betting. It's a play on your opponent's deficiencies, and it really just, it prints money, and every elite player is doing that. And it's honestly not that hard. You'll be able to make those decisions in position. This is going to be a theme throughout a lot of these plays, but you get to showdown. When you hit that one little pair, how many live players call ace king? You pick up some dinky little pair with your king 6 suited, and it gets to show down because they just want to show down their ace high, and that's free equity realization on our front, on our side, because we're in position and our opponents are playing too passively with 4-bets and post flop.
And even post flop, right? Because they're not going to lead most turns. They're not going to lead most rivers. They might even check call the 25% bet on the flop, and it's like, now we're just making a little bit of money here and there. So. And I think a lot of people panic because post flop and 3-bet pots is expensive and the SPR is a lot lower. But by the same token, like, doesn't mean your opponents are playing any better. And it's not to be rude to anybody. It's just like, if they're going to continue making the same passive mistakes, enjoy. Just smaller bets do a lot of really, really good things here.
And the thing you have to remember too is there's also this like tertiary value, this extra value when you're going crazy. They don't really know you're going crazy, and then all of a sudden you show up with king deuce suited, you show up with 7-5 suited in a spot where people think you're playing tight. It's a lot of deceptive value, especially in live games where people are very kind of precise about hand reading. You're gonna blow some people's minds open and make it really challenging for them to to keep up with what's going on. And then there'll be a whole meta that evolves after that, which can get interesting, but you'll get into that once you get comfortable through betting light. So
I mean, even if not, like, okay, you do it and you end up getting to showdown with a small pair and you win the pot and you show king deuce suited and everyone's like, what the heck is going on? You just ride that image for a little
yeah,
while,
yeah.
right? Because some people are going to think, oh, this dude's crazy. And the great thing about live is a lot of people will tell you that they, oh, so you're crazy. It's like, cool. So I just get to like roll back and
Yeah.
how are you going to adjust to me being crazy? Are you going to fold more or are you going to get a little lighter?
Yeah.
Either way, it's pretty easy to adjust from there.
Yeah, and I think what you'll find is often they'll lean into that 100% call range against you.
Yep.
And you'd think that's a problem, but it's really not. Definitely don't want to go as crazy as someone who's folding. But we can maybe that sort of initial range we're talking about where we're playing a lot of ace X suited, we're playing a lot of our suited connectors and higher card Broadway-esque hands, Jack nine suited type thing. That's a hand that's going to play fine in position against someone who's calling too light.
Yeah.
Because even if someone was opening correctly, you can't continue with 100% of your hands as calls.
No.
And even though it is a little bit stronger because there's no four bets, it's you're not going to have too many problems playing that pot in position. And
You're just not. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't really believe that, just open up Flopzilla for like 2 minutes, plug in a fairly wide-ish call versus 3-bet range, and plug in, I don't know, 7 or 8 different flops and just see how they hit. Like,
yeah,
then do it for another 20 flops and be like, oh, okay, the pattern is starting to become pretty obvious here. And if people are tending to play fairly fitter folds, it's a really, because again, like they also don't want to play this really bloated pot out of position. They feel goofy folding against your 3-bet preflop, so
Yep.
they call more. And then what are they doing post flop? Whether they call more against your small c bet or they fold a lot, either way, it's still pretty easy.
I mean, I think everyone's had that experience when they were a newer player and they were calling hands like ace 10 off to 3 bets or even the ace jack off we talked about. That's a tough hand to play. Even when you get the ace on the flop, okay, you check call, then the turn comes, there's a couple draws, and then they bomb it. Like,
Sure.
do you feel good about yourself? Because they definitely have ace king, they
Yeah.
definitely can have ace queen.
I don't
How
feel
do you
good.
like?
And that's the thing. Like, if you don't feel good with one of the better hands in your range, you know you found a major pain point in someone's game, and just lean on it.
Yes.
Absolutely. And who cares? You're going to get snapped off every now and then, and that's fine. So then, how are they going to adjust going forward? They're never going to fold top pair against you. What's the easy way to print money against that? Play tight, wait till big hands erupt, and then all of a sudden you have massive, massive value on your side. Now that sucks because it's rare and it doesn't happen very often, but you've maximized this part of their strategy, the value side, and then are they still folding too much otherwise? Not necessarily. I mean, they continue with top pair. Congratulations. It's tough to catch top pair.
Yeah, it is. It is. When you start playing lag, you really start to appreciate how infrequently top pair can come. So
That's the truth. That's the truth.
So yeah, I mean, the next one I would say is there's a common theme here where we're talking. I think a lot of the things we talked about in light three betting, they apply down the line because it is about that position. It is about being able to lean on people with when they're calling too much and not aggressively playing back enough.
Yeah.
And so the next one I would say is just really that most applicable to a live game, but a button ISO squeeze. So when everyone limps to you on the button, it can be the cutoff as well. That is a time that you can really start playing a huge volume of hands. I mean, this is when I play live, it just feels like the number one most profitable play across the board that I make. It's the number one sort of over bluffing spot that I have, I would say, besides 3-betting light. It is so powerful because your opponents are in there with a sort of weakened range because they would have open raised a lot of their strong hands typically. At 1-2, sometimes you see a little bit more merged limp ranges. Never said that word before.
Kind of way of describing it, sure.
Yeah. The old merge limp range.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you have to be a little bit careful, a little bit aware, and people will actually try and bait you into this a lot of times. It's not a good play on their end, but you do have to be aware of that. But button ISOs, I mean, it's just a money printer. If your online games have those limps there, it's amazing. Live, one of the things we love to do is just start really ramping up the raise size because everyone will be comfortable calling like a 5 BB raise size. Are they comfortable calling 10 BB straight up?
Correct.
And you can find people who will call that 10 BB. Just flat call it though. No one will be 3-betting you because they'll everyone's nervous about the big raise size, and then all of a sudden you have, again, a very similar spot to the 3-bet where you've put in a lot of money pre-flop. You kind of get to choose how strong the range you want here to be is, but they should probably be playing a lot of fit or fold to C bets out of position.
Pretty much. And the size here is so important because a lot of people say, oh, okay, there's a couple limpers, a few limpers, I'm going to start ISOing more. And then they ISO to 5, 6, 7 big blinds, which is kind of like default-ish size in that scenario. And you got to remember in poker, like default is good and it's a starting point, but it's not the end all be all. And this is one where you have to pay a lot of attention to who are the players involved. How is the table reacting to different sizes pre-flop? I mean, some games, you might see a 10x raise, and it's just like everyone's like, "Oh, hey, cool, like business
We're
time,
doing
let's
that
do it."
now,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So you really got to like be very aware of like how the table is going at the moment and your image, because once this gets burnt, life becomes very expensive, and that's when all of a sudden people start like throwing kings into their limp range and ace king, and it's like, what the hell is going on here? It's because this. But for the first couple, and you might only get a couple opportunities per night. It's not that you're going to get like heaps and heaps of opportunities. If you do, awesome, you're in a cool game. But more often than not, it's like 1 or 2 of these show up per night for me, and you just take them and you punish, absolutely punish. And the large sizing does a lot of good things, because even again, whenever you can look at someone's range and say, okay, with the strongest hands in your range, if you're still going to melt away a lot, I win. Right. So if they're limping 9s, 8s, 7s, which for an aggressive player seems ridiculous, but remember, live players, a lot of them just want to turn these into set mines. So if they're thinking about folding those to whatever size, you're playing 1-2, maybe you raise this up to 30, and they're going to melt away with those hands, they're not continuing with anything. That same thing for every other person. And when they do continue, it's very, very narrow, very, very easy to read. And again, you just play post flop very, very basically. It's very similar to what you do in the 3-bet pot.
Let's assume every time someone had 9s, like how much difficulty are you going to have playing a large pot in position versus someone with 9s?
Sure.
How many times is there going to be 2 overcourt or 2 or 3 overcards by the river where they're just going to be hating their life? It's a lot. It's a huge percentage of the time. And if you just apply that logic to their entire range, even if it's fairly strong, it's really hard to face that pressure out of position. It just really is. And especially if your image is good. If your image is good and you have a little respect, it's just miserable to play those even medium strength good hands that you don't get that often.
Correct.
Out of position against an aggressive player, it's just not fun. There's not much money to be made, honestly, even when we're doing it. It's it's just one of those things. You don't make a lot of money out of position. You're generally just on your back foot defending and hoping things don't go terribly wrong.
And hoping not to make massive mistakes, because it's easy to. You start overfolding a little too much, start getting a little too sticky one way or the other. I mean, it can get to be a very expensive night very quickly.
You have to be a good player to really make those tough calls and know, oh, like I have the right blockers in this situation. And these are not easy skills. And, when you're playing in a live game or even, pretty much any online game, people do not have the right frequencies. They have different tendencies. You may not know exactly what they're doing, but it's just not that hard for us in position to kind of, and especially as you gain experience, it's like, I think someone coming in and like, you're going to be uncomfortable if you raise queen 9 suited on the button for 10x the blind and get a caller out of the big blind. You're like, whoa, they called 10, and so like there's an adjustment phase when you do that, but over time you realize it's just, you have so many tools to put pressure, to show down the hands you want to show down, to put in, this is one of the reasons why I think the underbets, the 25% C bet sizings and things like that have become so popular. Is it's almost replicating the preflop scenario, right? Where we getting people to put in a lot of money behind on the flop. It's like, well, we could blow you off with a larger C bet, but what if we just get you to try and bait you into putting more and continuing with your weak range and putting more money in, and then you're more uncomfortable when the turn shows up. There's a lot of really nice situations, and sometimes that little 25% bet just lets you show down.
Sure.
And that's a great situation as well too. So it's just like, if you can pay 25% of a flop bet to see the river, and you're in a pretty good situation.
Very, very good spot. And this is one where this might be a lag play if I'm playing tag that evening. So for whatever reason, the table's forcing me to, or just opportunities aren't arising, I'm really not playing very laggy right at that moment, but this opportunity arises, I might just look at it and say, okay, this is just such a good spot to take it that I just
Yes.
throw a lag play instead of an entire lag strategy.
Yes.
So again, like you don't have to take all of this or nothing. You can sometimes just take little pieces, implement where spots come up, and then rock and roll. Because this is very difficult to get done and to do it well when you're playing incredibly loose that night.
Yes.
Because
It's true.
people, you're just not sure if they're throwing more, queens into the limp range, trying to trap you in. And yeah, they're probably still not going to four bet you enough, but all of a sudden their continuous range has more stuff that's just not going to melt away to the small C bets and whatever.
Yeah. I,
So
I
look
very
for
much agree. This is the most common play I make in a very crazy game.
Yeah.
Because even lags, every lag is aware of like the tag who's sitting there and they are just sitting there patient, and then boom, huge raise size.
Yeah.
Lags know to when to, the other loose players, in 2021, they know to back off
Correct.
when that happens.
Yeah.
And so we're actually really exploiting that. If we have that tight image because we're being forced to play tight at a crazy table, when it's 100% guaranteed you're going to be in position because you have that button, this is your time to bomb away, try and make a play, put the pressure back on people. And, they might take a shot. I've noticed live players love when they feel like you have a strong hand to come along and try and hit.
Yep.
It's like, even though it's negative EV,
Correct.
it's like a reverse lottery. It's like, well, if I hit, then we know the lag has or the tag has aces, and we're going to stack
Yep.
them. That's how they think. So they might see your huge raise size as like a challenge, as a money making opportunity. But this is actually just a lottery that has the EV pointing to you. You're now the casino.
Rushing it. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of, is that like you may be getting unexpected calls, but those calls may print for you post flop. And they may actually just like, the standard crazy player might be actually kind of pretty calm and give up easily on the flop.
Yep.
Which is what not everyone else is experiencing. So that's a really good situation that
Very good
bump
situation.
into.
Yeah, but again, like you have to pay a lot of attention here. It's easy to go too aggressive or totally miss the signal. Like, hey, no one's falling for it anymore, regardless of your size. All of a sudden, they become incredibly inelastic. Just you have to pay attention here. If you don't, you will get walloped, and it won't take many of these before all of a sudden you're down a buy-in or two without even trying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll just wrap up with this play does come up online. It is you don't ever go quite as crazy as the ranges you would do live. I run into situations here where I will any two cards it,
Correct. Yes.
5 limps. I'm like, this is just my money.
Yeah.
And my image is good or something like that. Online, I tend to lean more towards like, oh, I'm like bumping a few extra hands into range. In core, we have a good ISO range I think people can start with. And if I'm playing lag, I might just be adding.
Correct.
10%, 15% in that range. So
Yep.
it's a good place to think. You're not going super nuts online in my experience, and the sizes are not quite as crazy because you will be facing more of those 3 bets, which is
Correct.
that's what really lets us use the large raise size.
Exactly. Yep. Good. All right. So we got lighter 3 betting. We got the wide ISO. What else?
I think this is probably, I suspect, one of your favorites. It's definitely one of my favorites, but the in position squeeze. And this is one that I think most players do not make. This is not a play that I think most people are comfortable with. They're not familiar with it. They don't know what hands to do with. That's a very common one. But this is just a play where it mimics a lot of all the dynamics that we just talked about. You're going to be in position post flop. People are going to overestimate the strength of your range. When you're in position and you see, the variable that we're looking for is aggressive opening range and then a looser call range.
Yep.
If you see those two dynamics in play, that's when we can really start ratcheting up how much we're going to come after them. And what's really interesting is that, especially in a live game, because the raise sizes get bigger, we're going to actually, probably with a, say 1 unit is the open, then we get a call. We're going to go, or let's say it's a 4x open in a live game. Someone flats that, so there's 9 big blinds in the pot. We're actually going to go to like 16 to 20 big blinds here.
Yeah.
And that will get a lot of folds, even in a very loosey-goosey live game, because that is a huge jump up that people are just not used to.
Correct.
And because of that, it actually has, in my opinion, more favorable fold equity often in live games than a 3-bet light.
Yep.
And I think this is like less true online where people are a little bit more keyed into the play.
Hmm.
But even still, I'm really much it's actually very similar. I would say online you're being more respectful with the range you're going to choose. You're going to add, take our squeeze ranges, add a few hands,
Yep.
go at it that way. But live, you can go nuts. I mean, I found many situations when my image is really tight and just sitting around, these variables come up. It doesn't even have to be in position. It's
Correct.
just if you think the play is thinner,
Yep.
you want to have that position, but you can make this play in or out of position, and you can do any two cards and you'll get a lot of respect. And one of the things that I think people worry about is that, oh, well, in a live game, people's opening ranges are tighter.
Hmm.
What does happen is that if you have the right image with this squeeze, people think you have a very strong hand. You'll get credit for queens plus ace king,
Regularly.
and they'll fold jacks. I've seen that happen a lot. I've seen them fold ace king a lot. People will not four bet you with ace king in live games frequently. It's a really good situation. It's not a comfortable one for most people, but
It's the weirdest thing because it should be fairly comfortable. I mean, once you study it out a little bit, and we've done a lot of squeeze content within Pro and definitely within Core as well, and it's really just look at the variables of play. Look at the original opener, and are they likely to find that fold button line? Again, same concepts we talked about when we were talking about the like three bet earlier. And then the person who called or people that called, are they likely to melt away a lot? And again, if they're going to melt away with a lot of their strongest hands, if they're the kind that won't three bet tens or won't three bet nines and isn't really going to love facing a big squeeze, especially when they're out of position, like they're folding everything else too. Like you got to keep in mind, like if they're folding the top of like roughly the strongest hands in their range, then they're folding all the mediums and all the weaker stuff, and it's just like so they start melting like 80% of the time,
yeah.
and it's not too difficult. And again, if they're going to continue, they're probably not four betting either
Yes.
player all that often. I mean, the opener is more likely to find a four bet in there somewhere
Yes.
because they have aces and kings, whereas the other person most likely doesn't. So, okay, fine, but it's not like they're like continuing by four betting more often. It's just when they have those hands.
Yeah.
So it becomes super easy to combat when they continue, and more likely they're just going to hate life. And the opener is in a weird spot because they don't really want to call more necessarily, let the other person call more and get a good price. So they actually start folding a little bit more often, from my experience. And the other person doesn't want to call because, well, they don't have that strong of a range anyway. So do they really want to call with, the tens, the nines, the ace jack off, the king queen? I mean, even king queen start getting folded a lot. It's just like print.
Think about
Print.
yourself in that situation when like a seemingly tight player puts in a huge pre-flop raise for a live game.
Yep.
You're like, whoa, nines? How do I feel about nines? I don't feel very good about nines.
Right.
It's very difficult to defend, and I think that's the running theme, I think, between all these live plays, that these are the most difficult plays to defend correctly.
And that's what started my whole journey with this and exploration was like, okay, I'm going to literally write down every single spot that I hate, that I feel uncomfortable. I'm just going to look at like how my ranges look there, why I might feel uncomfortable there, and then reverse engineer it enough where I can start doing the same thing to other people. That's all it is. Where do
Yes.
I hate life? Cool. Now I'm going to use that on everyone else who plays similar to me. Oh, wait. People that play even a little bit less like me still hate these things too. Cool. Throw more in, throw more in, throw more in. Until eventually you hit that cap where it's like, no one's folding anymore.
Yeah.
And now when no one's folding anymore, it's either going to be a very expensive bluffing evening, which can still be lucrative.
Yes,
There are still
yes.
times where people, sure, won't fold against the three bet, won't fold against the squeeze, won't fold against the C bet, but they fold against the barrel. And they're fold against the all in on the river. So those can be expensive evenings. But these are more just look for spots where people are just over folding too much. And when you find them and they're there, you print. It's super easy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something we've been talking about a lot recently, I feel like, is we're looking for lines that help us generate mistakes.
Yeah.
And that is really what we're doing with lag play. And the squeeze is it feels like a rare play, but when you really open up your thinking and you think about these frequencies, you're thinking about that open raise frequency, you're thinking about that call frequency, you can really realize that like, oh, they're opening a lot, this person's calling. It might be a super wide range call, which you'll have a lot in your games. You just have a 40-50% VPIP person.
Yeah.
They're just essentially adding odds to your steal.
Right.
Because they're not gonna have an easy time continuing however they decide to play it, whether it's call the raise or just outright fold. it's not going to be easy for them to continue throughout the whole hand. And so you're making a 3-bet light with extra odds is the way I look at it when I have the right variables lined up.
Yep, 100%. And the big thing to kind of keep in mind here is a lot of people will look at this spot and say, but I have a hand I want to call with, right? And that's kind of like,
Yes.
when you're going down like the mental checklist of these are the things I'm considering, it's okay, do I have a hand that I default fold? Do I have a hand that I want to continue with? And if it's a continue hand, most of that just gets shunted into the call range. So you got a couple issues here. One, you're taking a hand that could be a more profitable squeeze, throwing into a call range. That's already not great.
Yeah.
And then two, you're actually incentivizing people to squeeze behind you, which isn't great. Now, that might not come up a tremendous amount in your smaller live games or your smaller online games, but it'll eventually get to the point where you're gonna be like, what the heck? They keep coming after me. It's not personal. It's just that you've created a massively incentivized position for them, and good aggressive players are gonna take it.
I think good tags often are the most vulnerable to
Yes.
the squeeze, because it's when they do call, their squeeze, their call range is so capped. They would always be 3-betting. They learned to
super
3-bet the
strong.
ace king. They learned all those 3-bets, and so they are vulnerable when you call. And I think the thing you have to realize is that calls are very, very thin in terms of profitability. So when you're getting caught essentially with a capped range that you can't defend, because in GTO you should be defending pretty much 100% if the open raiser doesn't defend,
Right. Yeah.
which is something people don't think about. So it's like when you make the original pre-flop raise call, you're essentially required to defend against squeezing scenarios, very high frequency.
Which got baked into why our pre-flop calling ranges look the way they do in our ranges.
Bingo.
Right.
Bingo. Yeah. So it's just something that, it's one of those plays. It helps us go on offense, have to worry a bit less about our defense. It's a play that most people I think are really uncomfortable making, and you should definitely have it in your play book.
Yeah. Essentially, the way that I would think about it is when you get into a situation, think about whether you're going to fold or continue. And for most people, if they say I have a continuance hand, then they default prioritize calling over 3-betting or calling over the aggressive line, and just reverse that. If you're like, hey, this is a continuance hand, what would happen if I re-raise here? Ask that question first instead of should I call first. It's a mental tweak, and it might not help a tremendous amount in the short run and the long run, but in the short run, you're going to start looking for opportunities. That's the whole thing, is just to turn your brain on for looking for the spots. And I've challenged players, who play a little bit, but they study in a decent amount. They're trying to get more aggressive pre-flop, but they're not really sure. I'm like, look, you're gun shy. You don't want to take the spot right off the bat. For this session, all you're going to do is write down every spot that you think could have been a good squeeze or could have been a good light 3-bet, whatever, or a good light 4-bet, and then write it down. Write down all the parameters you think are baked into it. Study that spot super in depth when you get home, or we'll go through it together or throw it on Discord, whatever.
Yeah.
Even if you're gun shy, you're like, I don't want to risk a bunch of big blinds. I don't want to risk a bunch of money and be wrong and lose a bunch of money. No problem. I understand. But you have to at least be looking for the spots. The more you study the spots out, the easier it is to say, you know what? I can identify quicker, A, this is a good spot, and B, I'm feeling less gun shy. Because you have the mathematical backing to say this is plus EV rather than, oh no, I might lose money. And really, those are two very different parts of your brain that are firing. One is on the fear side, doesn't want to lose, and the other is just like, objectively, this is good. And as such, I have to take it, because if I don't, I'm losing money.
Yep.
Weirdly enough.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great approach, is that, like, even if you're not taking the play, if you're watching the spot, eventually you'll say, okay, the variables are perfect this time. I can go ahead and do it and fire. And I think that's a great way to approach it.
Yep. Because again, it's not jump in and feel like you have to play and bluff every single spot. It's look for the best of them, take the best of them, and then you're going to start taking the more marginals. And if the spots are good, and if they're not, chill, relax. You have tag.
I very much think that is the way I like to approach lag. I know you have a much more I like to think about it as reckless, but I don't think it is reckless for you. But you default towards putting the pressure on, trying to generate the mistake, whereas I try and be very precise and make sure I'm always in the positive expected value when I'm making the play. So I think those are both valid approaches. And just be aware, if you are more gun shy, which I know a lot of our people tell me they are. You can be a little bit more precise. You can, okay, I looked at it, I thought about it, I backed off on that one. But at least you're looking, find that one, fire it off. Squeezing is just such a it's just so effective when
It
when
is.
you start finding them. Yeah, and I would just say, like, to wrap it up, the ranges that we're looking at online, again, we're trying to add a few hands here and there. We're trying to just buff out our frequency a bit more. Live, you can find spots where it's just like everyone's going to think you have aces because you sat down, haven't done anything yet.
Yep.
And it's live. It's a printer sometimes.
And because you can listen. And people, you hear people having conversations about like, oh, I would never give that action. It's like, oh, right, mental note, great, great, awesome. Here comes
Yeah.
the big size for you next time. I mean, listening in live goes a very, very long way. You don't even have to be an extrovert at all. Just listen.
Yep.
Just listen. They tell you everything you need to know.
All right. So I actually mentally added another one.
All right.
But so our last one on our original list was forbidding light.
Sure.
And this is something that I think everyone feels uncomfortable with. Even high stakes players, I think, are pretty uncomfortable with four betting light. It's very difficult to build a range, which is one of the problems. It's just very uncomfortable.
Sure.
You know, four betting ace king, sure, it's great, it's fun. Everyone has a good time with that. Once you're starting to four bet ace five suited, I think the question comes up is like, what am I doing with this? With you have to have like a level of preparation to know kind of your frequency. You feel silly when you put in, 50 big blinds, or trying to think of I guess in a
20,
online
20, 20, 25 big blinds is the typical 4-bet size. Online,
setting.
live,
Yeah,
it can get a little wonky.
people feel really bad when it doesn't go well, especially with the first couple when they start doing it. It's just the play that people just psychologically don't handle well.
Correct.
And because of that, that's a huge opportunity. And the thing about it is, especially in position, all these plays, starting in position is great. With four betting, it just makes you so much more difficult to play against. Now, this is not something that comes up as much against the weaker players, but when you do have a tougher player sit down in your game, when you have a tag, this is the play that makes you hard to mess with. This is the play that, makes the table your table instead of their table. This is, I think, a very important play online if that's your
100%.
focus.
Yeah.
This is one of the number one things that I think people can add to their win rate with. And it's tough to do, but it really does come up pretty frequently. It's not a multiple time per session thing, but if you're making this play once a session, that's a big boon to your win rate because these are larger pots. And yeah, how did you think about getting started at four betting?
It's interesting. So you bring up light 4-betting, and the first thing that comes to my mind isn't actually the traditional light 4-bet. It's the cold 4-bet because I find that is a complete printer. So cold 4-bet is, say, middle position opens, button 3-bets, you're in the big blind, and you decide to just 4-bet it. So you're just cold doing so. No one knows what the hell to do. Nobody does, because it's just like, are you really going crazy here, or like what's going on? And all of a sudden, like everyone starts overfolding. So this is really beneficial when you have another lag at your table who's trying to implement the lighter 3-bets. Print. Because he's already told you. Like, so for instance, if you sit down, you're like, this dude's clearly paying attention, doing some good stuff. That person decides to light 3-bet on the button. Well, that means he's already done the research and the scouting report on the original open, right? So it's like, I'm just banking off that. He's clearly playing his range aggressively, and all of a sudden he's folding 95% of the time against this. So
We're outsourcing.
precisely. Yeah.
Love it.
Weird way of looking at it, but that's the way that I look at it. So yeah, it's a very atypical play, but it's something. It is atypical because there's just not a lot of like aggression in these smaller and micro games.
Yeah.
It's just default, right? People are uncomfortable, more gun shy. They play more passive. As such, there's not as much light 3-betting. And okay, fine. So if it comes up, look for it.
Yes.
As for traditional 4-betting, it's just one of those where like you should have a really good reason for doing it. And it's that, hey, the person who's 3-betting me isn't just the king's plus type, isn't just the queen's plus ace king type. Yes. Once you get that feeling and you're like, oh no, I think they're messing with me, I think they're trying to set a tone, whatever, here comes the entirety of my range. It's coming right after them.
Yep.
And it has to, because I want to disincentivize them from 3-betting me, and I want my steals back. The worst thing, in my opinion, that can happen is you're the aggro person at a table, someone comes in and shuts you down, and now you are just sitting there with your hands in your lap, just waiting for something to develop, and they are just, especially when they have position on you. So this is one way of you fighting back and being able to say, nope, I'm going to get my steals back. I'm going to get my wider middle position opens back. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's not even trying to do so from an ego issue. I know it sounds very ego when I say that, but it's like, no, like I lose my edge. Like I lose my hourly if I let you take over this table. And as such, I have to fire. So if you get the idea that they're three betting too wide, and the wider that it gets, the more you're just like pummeling four bets, in my opinion.
It's funny. I don't even find I actually have to do it against someone who's three betting super wide.
Sure.
Because naturally what I find is, okay, we sit at a table, it's gonna be online and live, and the person on my left is more aggressive. I'm naturally tightening up my opens. That's just me. I'm gonna start at a very balanced place. I'm gonna take away a lot of that lag from the opening perspective.
Sure.
However, what I feel like I can do is kind of what you said is, okay, now I'm going to be tighter. They're probably going to approach their three bet game the way they normally do. But because no one takes an aggressive four betting plan, I now have leeway where it's like, okay, my play looks by the book, buttoned up. They shouldn't have any inclination that I'm playing tight. Now I'm going to take four bets and over bluff.
Sure.
Because I know they are going to give it that respect. And in the live game, I found people will fold queens, people will fold jacks, even if they only had a three bet range of nines plus, a bunch of broadways, some suited aces. I'm getting enough folds because I'm the beauty of the four bet is you're four betting at someone goes to 3x, you go to 9x. You're only maybe going in position to 15x the blind, 14x the blind. Sorry.
Usually those are like 20.
Yeah. I'm saying I'm
adding
21, 22 times the blind. You can do a very small one in position. I'm a big fan of that because even if they feel like odds into a call, you now get the very large you get a very small percentage based C bet and a four bet pot. And there's a lot of good boards for four bet ranges typically as the four better. So I actually find I can go after even more respectful tags with this range because they'll be more cognizant about making those folds or they'll have a tendency to overfold.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me. I mean, this is just one where I think the difficult thing is that it just doesn't come up all that much, especially if you're playing like smaller live games, micro online. Like there's just not a lot of three betting in general.
Yeah.
And even when you mention like jacks and tens, like not every live player is three betting those, especially at 1-2. So it's just one of those where you have to pay attention to who your opponent is, and if they're the kind of person who's going to three bet those hands and others. And to your point, you don't need a tremendous amount of folds. I mean, the break even percentage on four bets is like typically not that high, and as such you can really ratchet it here and also get away with the smaller sizing and still print. But I think for a lot of people it's easy to get out of control and take themselves so far out of their own comfort zone that they can make some massive mistakes. And all of a sudden they're like, I guess I'm odds into calling like a 5-bet shove with ace 4 suited because I don't know, maybe they have king 4. It's just like maybe, but like I don't know. I think once you start getting into the 4 and 5-bet, 6-bet game, it's so hyper mathematical that you would do yourself a very good service by spending, I don't know, half hour a day for a week or two just mathematically proofing these spots out on both sides. Essentially making sure that you have your call versus 5-bet range in there, you have your own 5-bet range in there. Getting mathematical here helps a lot.
And very, very lucky for you all, we have that taken care of in Pro GTO. So you don't even have to think about it. You can just show up, you get exact ranges. We make it as simple as possible. When we're getting into the 5-bets, we have a few half frequencies on things like jacks or something like that. But yeah, it's taken care of. You can just go in there, play the exact same range every time. You don't have to worry about die rolls, looking at your watch, nothing like that. No, we built it for the person who wants to have a nice, simple, straightforward range.
Correct.
And
without having to panic about, oh, what should I be? Should I build it from scratch? Do I have to go run solvers myself? No. You always have a starting point, and that's again, like we talked about earlier. Having a starting point is more than half the battle.
Yes. Yeah. And I'll add, I think 4-bets is when the range is building your range and building your approach gets the most difficult. But even adding in just a little bit of 4-betting makes you so much more difficult to play against, makes you so much more profitable. I think people don't understand. And that just even adding in, that 5, 10 to 20% of bluffs into your 4-bet range when you were just playing a value range beforehand, it makes your entire range more profitable. When, you know, you're basically either taking that percentage that you are 4-betting and just getting that pot for free, or like getting it as if you had aces or something like that.
Yeah.
Or your aces are now going to immediately start making more money. All your value hands are going to start making more money because your opponents are overly calling down or whatever.
Correct.
Because of this. And so it really is just a free value play, especially coming from someone who doesn't do it. If you don't have any 4-bet bluffs in your range right now, which is probably most people, or they do it very sparingly, it's a more randomized situation. Number one, just building the frequency. And then number two, one of the things I've found is that a lot of people don't 4-bet ace king. So start making sure you're hitting your 4-bets with ace king, and then watch what happens, right? Because you're very happy when someone folds a strong range and you have ace king. That's a great situation.
Sure.
And so just watch what happens with your, think about when you're 4-betting ace king, what's your sizing, what's the folds you're getting, see what's happening, really pay attention, and then think, well, what's the difference between having, ace king and ace 5 suited? Maybe you got the fold on the c bet on the flop.
Sure.
I guess this is your entire 4-bet range. It doesn't have to be ace king, but ace king will be the highest volume of your 4-bets typically. And just remember, you can do this with other hands. It does work.
Yep.
And
So I think that's a good point, and one that I want to add on just a little bit, because I think a lot of people who are playing the tighter ranges right now, when we start talking about bluffing, there's like, I don't know if it's ever going to work. I'm just like, well, think about, I don't know, the last 7 times you've complained about your aces never getting paid off. Like, if you're complaining about that, inherently it means they're folding a lot. So I actually don't look at my bluff part and say, okay, use that as my feeling more confident to do more bluffs. I look at the value part of my range and say, well, if that's getting too many folds, then inherently I should feel more confident throwing more hands that they're still going to continue folding too much against.
Yes.
So maybe it's a mental perspective shift. I don't know. But either way, like, that could be a massive confidence booster of, wait, I really am not getting paid off very much with aces and kings. Great. It means you need to be bluffing a lot more, or at least a little bit more to start.
Yeah. And so I would actually encourage people to do something that I think is a little bit wilder than most of these bluffing spots, which is when you get in this spot and you feel like the variables are there, take a chance with whatever hand you have. Sure. Especially if this is just your first time, like, saying, oh, I'm going to, 4-bet ace 5 suited and these ranges, or ace 5 suited and ace 4 suited. It's like, it can be a while before that comes up.
Yeah.
Look for that spot where you do think someone's coming after you more aggressively. Your image is decent. Things are about right. Maybe you just have an ace in your hand.
Sure.
Which is actually not a bad situation because you're blocking a lot of their best hands.
Yep.
Maybe you have Jack 10 suited and just have a lot of playability. Go for it.
Yep.
Just try it out once.
Yep.
See what happens.
Yep.
That's not the perfect approach in the long run. We definitely want to take a frequency-based approach in general with 4-betting, but this is going to open up your eyes to a whole new aspect of lag play when you're dealing with someone who starts fighting back against your light 3-bet strategy. If you're able to add in this level that people are not used to dealing with, you do, especially in live games, end up in a situation where it's like, now the table is yours.
Yep.
Everyone's backed off from you.
Yep.
They're going to play straightforward against you. It really closes the circle on a powerful lag strategy.
100%. And it builds your confidence and starts showing you, yeah, these things do work. It's not just me, feeling gun shy all the time. Like, that's one of the most important things is there's a mental barrier for most people when it comes to this stuff. So you just need to get over the mental barrier, whatever that takes. Yeah. I mean, for me personally, before I used to play any live session, I would go play 2NL online and play 100% of VPIP and shove every single hand. And it was just to get over the, okay, I need to get my brain ready that I'm okay losing money. Doesn't matter how much money, because again, at the table, all we're doing is thinking in terms of big blinds.
Yep.
But I needed to train my brain that we're okay throwing money in.
Yep.
Let's rock and roll.
Yeah.
So whatever it takes.
Kiss that first 4-bet bluff goodbye. Just be like, okay, I'm doing this. It's gone.
Yep.
I'm just gonna see what happens.
Yep.
Don't get too tied up in the result. Just as, oh, this is like a thing we can do. Oh, maybe they called you and played a pot. And,
exactly.
Because I think once you play a pot, I think people intuitively are able to follow along with like the scenarios that could, like they hit here, but maybe they would have folded on a different texture, or man, they hit here, but they played so passively. I got to realize all my equity, and you start seeing what happens. And I think that's a huge part of it.
It gets your brain racking in what's actually happening versus what could be happening and all the fear that's related to this could go really wrong. I could lose a lot of money, and as such, you don't do anything. And
Yeah,
frozen deers in this game do not make any money. You
indeed.
get hit by a damn car.
So I think we've been going for a long time, so I'm just going to give them a turbo wrap up
Sure.
bluff spot. And I think this is probably one of the best parts about playing lag is what I will call sort of the creative bluff situation. The, one off, we see bet the flop, decided we need to check the turn. They check to us on the river. Now we have the option. Maybe they bet the river and you're looking at it and you think, oh, the ranges line up for a bluff raise here.
Sure.
I have a plausible holding or something like that. And I think this is one of the number one spots for a lag to just print extra value, because when you're deep into a hand, it's when hand rating is the most valuable. It's when people's ranges have been condensed to whatever holdings they will, if they're a straightforward player, you might have the most information on that river, seeing all their actions in position.
Yep.
These are great spots to just like take a shot and see if you can represent something. You see if you can get away with a bluff frequency that doesn't make sense. And I find, this is probably more applicable live, but it definitely comes up online as well, where you just have a hand reading opportunity to key in. And I think this is a really good one because we've talked about how important it is to pay attention when you're playing lag.
Yeah.
This is one of those opportunities to really print value off of this. They're all different. They're all unique. So this isn't your like staple play, but just keeping your mind in, watching those ranges go by, watching the situation set up, seeing if you can peg someone in a situation where they were overfold is such a powerful way to start looking at poker and really give you that lag mindset to start taking advantage of people in a big way.
Yep. 100% agreed. Excellent. Anything else you want to chit chat on or hammer on?
No, I'm done talking.
Well, as am I. Well, thank you so much for hanging out today, Chris. Thank you for listening. As always, if you have any comments or questions, do not hesitate to let us know. You can always join us on Discord today at redchippoker.com/Discord. Join for free. Chit chat with over 1,000 poker players over there and us as well. And if you need anything, just give us a heads up. Otherwise, we'll see you back next week with a brand new episode. In the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.